Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to be a two-part dinner stream. The first part is going to be our prep with our lamb roast and our sourdough discard dinner rolls. And then we'll be back in about an hour and a bit to do the next one, which is finishing up the lamb roast and the rest of dinner. So we're going to start with our sourdough discard rolls. I'm going to add a half a cup of warm water to our bowl. And then we are going to add in 2 teaspoons of yeast. So we're going to be using sourdough discard in it, but not active sourdough. So we'll be using a bit of yeast to help these pop as well. So 2 teaspoons of yeast, and then we are going to add in 2 tablespoons of brown sugar. And this is going to activate our active dry yeast. It's going to get it start to foam. I'm going to give it a little stir. And then we're going to let this sit and start to get foamy. And once it's nice and foamy, we'll finish that off. Now we're going to head over to our lamb roast. So I've got this big lamb leg roast from Costco. And we are going to start prepping it. So let me open this guy up. And we're gonna put it in our, this is like a roasting Dutch oven. There we go. Put them in here, and I'm gonna take off the little netting that it has around it. You can cook it in the netting if you want to, but I'm gonna take it off because we're gonna be adding in some spices. And get this netting out. And then I'm gonna be placing it the fat side down. So I know there's like kind of a fat all around it, but you see at the bottom, this is the white stuff. That's the fat, that's the heavy side. We're gonna put that side down so the top can get nice and roasted. I'm gonna give my hands a quick wash. Beautiful. Okay. And now we're gonna let it sit there for a second. I'm gonna chop up half of an onion. Wipe this real quick. Put those to go in the wash. So we're gonna cut our onion in half. We're gonna use the other half later with our dinner tonight. We're gonna cut off the edges. I'm gonna take off this skin right here. That won't taste as good. And then I'm just gonna cut it into 4 kind of chunks like this. And then what we're going to do with our lamb is I'm gonna cut some slits down the middle into our lamb roast. And we're gonna stuff some of these onions into our lamb roast so that it will have a nice flagrant flavor of onions. So we're gonna just stuff them in there. And right into those little slots. And tucking them in. And this is just gonna allow the onion flavor to season the whole roast. And get a little over here. Okay, I'm gonna give my hands a little wash. Okay, now we're gonna take our garlic. You could use fresh garlic if you wanted to. You could peel it, and then you wouldn't have to.
You have a question? What are you making?
This is a lamb roast. So we are prepping tonight's dinner. It's going to be a 2-part stream. We are going to be doing our sourdough discard rolls and our lamb roast, and then we're going to start the proofing on it and the baking of this, and then we'll come back in an hour and finish up dinner. So we're going to put some garlic over our whole roast. And then I'm going to try to get some in each of those little slots as well. You could use full fresh garlic and just peel them and then shove them in each of the cracks as well. And then mash and mince up some to put on the skin around it. And this is going to help season the whole roast. Otherwise, when you are seasoning it, if you don't make the little slits in it, only the outside gets seasoned. So this is going to help for whole flavor to get in. And I do have my oven preheating to 400 degrees. Okay, and I'm just spreading this garlic all around. gonna do a lot of hand washings because we're touching the meat and then spices. Okay, now I'm gonna take some garlic salt as well. We're gonna give it a nice sprinkle all the way around. And then I'm going to use some dried rosemary. If you had fresh rosemary, you could do that as well. You could take the sprigs of fresh rosemary and stuck them into each one of those slots and then put some on top as well. There we go. Giving it a nice, I'm gonna use probably about, I would say maybe 1.5 teaspoons of rosemary. We just wanna cover it all the way around. And then my favorite spice to go with lamb is sage. So we're going to be using some rubbed sage. I just replaced it because I used up the last of it on our lamb chops we made the other day. So we've got our rubbed sage. And I'm gonna give a nice coating of this around. I'm probably gonna use about 2 teaspoons of this, because sage just pairs so well with our with lamb. It has a nice, it pairs well with the gamier texture. And now this is the fun part. We're gonna put a little bit of olive oil in my hands, and I'm just going to pat it all the way around and kind of work in those seasonings so that they'll kind of form a nice crisp crust on our lamb. And then I'll tuck some of those in to the little salts. And this is just gonna allow those seasonings to crisp up. Perfect. And then I'm gonna put my hand underneath and kind of put some of it there. Beautiful. And now our lamb roast is ready to go in the oven. Let me give my hands a quick wash. Super simple recipe, but makes a delicious lamb roast. I have my oven preheated to 400. I'll pop that in there and for about 1.5 hours, and then our lamb dinner will be ready. Okay, we've got, you can see our yeast is starting to foam, which is what we want. Perfect. Okay.
How many pounds is that roast?
That I would say was probably like a 5-pound roast, 5-6 pound roast. So not a super huge one, but it is a boneless roast, which is nice because then it's just all tender meat and juiciness. Okay, we are going to make our rolls now. So we're using a sourdough discard roll. So I've got my sourdough discard. I'm gonna give it a quick stir just in case some of that's liquid, also known as like the hooch, comes up to the top. And we are going to add in 1 cup of sourdough discard. If your sourdough is active, it's fine. We're not using the active part to rise our rolls. We use some yeast in this, but it will have the nice good flavor of sourdough as well as the good probiotics. So we're going to be using 1 cup of sourdough discard, and I'm going to mix this in right here with our yeast that is starting to foam. Beautiful. Give this a nice, perfect. Scooping it all out. And then we're going to give this a good stir until it is kind of incorporated into the yeast. Perfect. And then we're going to add in 2 eggs. This will also help with the rising process. These are going to be a lovely fluffy dinner roll. So 1 and got it shelled. There we go. 2 eggs. And I'm gonna pop these yolks with my spoon, and then we're gonna mix them as well. Good. Okay. You could also use, if you had a dough hook on your like stand mixer, you could use that to mix this as well. Okay, now we're going to add in 2.5 tablespoons of olive oil. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. 1, 2, and about 1/2 tablespoons of olive oil. So we have our wet ingredients mixed together. Now we just need to add salt and our flour. There we go, have that all mixed together. I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of salt. Okay. And mix it. I kind of eyeball mine because I've been cooking for so long, but you can definitely use a measuring cup if you want to. I think once you kind of get used to it at a time, you're more comfortable with eyeballing spices. And now we are going to add in 3.5 cups of flour. We're going to be using, this recipe just needs all-purpose flour. It doesn't need bread flour, but you could use bread flour if you wanted. And we're going to add in 3.5 cups. So 1, 2, 3, and 1/2. We're gonna give it a good stir, and then the next part is we're gonna knead it out on our counter to make sure. And you wanna knead this either with your dough hook for about 5 minutes or with your hands, because the kneading is gonna give you that good elasticity in your dough. An under-kneaded dough can sometimes be more stiff and not as soft and elasticy. Okay, put this over here. And now I'm gonna dump it out, and we are going to knead it. Let me scrape it all out in here. And we're gonna knead our dough together. And that's kneading. If you've never kneaded before, you're simply just pushing into the countertop.
And what are you preparing?
We are making a sourdough discard dinner roll for tonight. It uses a cup of sourdough discard in it, and
to go
with our lamb roast. Yes, we have our lamb roast that we're prepping. We cut slits down our roast, and then we shoved in 1/2 of an onion sliced up. Then we covered it with some minced garlic, and then we added garlic salt, rosemary, and sage. Sage is just a great spice that goes well with lamb. Okay, I'm kneading it, but I'm just gonna use it and try to grab all the leftover bits in my bowl to get all of that incorporated in, because we're gonna use this bowl for our rise time.
You have a question? Did you use dry active yeast?
I did. I used, active dry, yes. So I used 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast in our dough, along with 1 cup of sourdough discard. So the sourdough discard is gonna give you those good probiotics and that nice sourdough flavor, but it's not gonna be used for the rising process. We also used 2 eggs in this as well, so that will also help in the rising process. Those are going to be a really nice, lovely, fluffy dinner roll. So now we're just going to be kneading it. And so if you're new to making bread, whether it's yeast or sourdough, kneading is a really important process, especially with, even if you do pastas, but with a yeast bread, kneading is really important. So you essentially just are pushing it in and kind of stretching it down onto the counter and then folding it over. It's a great workout if you're doing this. If you make pasta, in order to have those like velvety smooth noodles that aren't stiff, you have to knead your pasta dough, which is a stiff dough, for about 10 minutes to get the perfect consistency. It just helps with the breakdown of the gluten. There we go. So we're folding it through, and it's forming a nice, it's like somewhat sticky, but when you're actually handling it quick, it's not super sticky. This is gonna make a great dough. And I'm going to put this in my oven. I have a dough proofing or bread proofing thing on my oven, which keeps my oven at 95 degrees. So it's perfect for rising it. And we're gonna let this rise for about 45 minutes. Then I will give it a quick knead, and then we'll break it up into about 16 rolls and put them in a 9x13 pan, and we'll let them rise for another 30 to 45 minutes before baking. And then we'll be baking these in just a little bit. So when I put my dough, I've got it kneaded nicely. I'm gonna just form it into a ball by just kind of pushing those in. We're gonna add just a little drizzle of oil on the bottom of my bowl. And then what I like to do is I'm gonna use my ball of dough, and I'm gonna roll it in the oil as well as coating the sides. This is going to allow my dough to rise without catching on the sides of the bowl, which can prevent it from rising up. Sometimes if your dough catches, it prevents the spring that can happen. And then we're gonna cover with, press, I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. We're just gonna cover with press and seal or cheesecloth or towel or whatnot. And then I'm gonna let this proof in my oven. And now we're gonna go pop this roast in the oven that is preheated to 400 degrees. And we're not putting a lid on. We're doing a nice roast, so we want it to kind of cook in our roasting pan without a lid on. So I have my oven preheated to 400 degrees, and we are gonna be cooking at this. And there, it's gonna cook down. Well, guys, I'll let you guys have a quick peek at our breads sourdough bread we started earlier. We did at our lunchtime. So this is our traditional sourdough. You can see we've got some lovely bubbles forming in it. And this is the prize. This is the one we made earlier. This is our cheddar and green onion sourdough.
You have a question? How many minutes for the roast?
The roast, you kind of do it by pound. It's about 10 to 15 minutes per pound. So I'm gonna have it in there for about an hour to an hour and a half. After about an hour, I'll kind of give it a check, but that's when I'm gonna start prepping the rest of the dinner.
And when are you coming back?
We'll be coming back in about an hour, I'll say, because it's gonna need, you don't wanna, when you take your roast out, you wanna let it sit 10 minutes. So we'll be back in about an hour to finish up dinner. That means we'll be baking our rolls, our roast, and making our sides. So, well, thank you guys for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget to join us back here in an hour as we finish up dinner. Thanks again for joining us, and don't forget to like and subscribe.